want to thank you for your interest in my first novel, Hunger of the Pine. I want to take some time today to tell you a little bit about this book, as well as what inspired me to write it. To be completely honest with you, this storyline is something that came through me. Consider it a stroke of insight, and it came to me several years ago. It sort of feels like the story in this book wanted to be written by something bigger than me. As far as how I personally got interested in this topic in general of homelessness and of the foster care system and children who are part of the foster care system, that really started in childhood, because I spent a lot of my time in childhood around children who were part of that foster care system. I remember being a child in these circumstances and being completely shocked that the kinds of things that I was seeing is something that could just go on. It was obvious to me as a child, based on a lot of my experiences, that there were a lot of holes in the foster care system. And of course, as I grew older, that turned into seeing that there were a lot of holes within society in general. If there weren't these holes, you couldn't see people sleeping out on the streets. So I became really curious as to the why behind homelessness, and the why behind kids ending up in the foster care system, and the why behind the foster system's many failures. What this book is designed to do is to give you that picture of why, but from a first-person perspective. I understand that telling someone about a subject only goes so far, and it doesn't come close to first-hand experience. So what I came up with is this idea of putting people in the shoes of a homeless youth and looking through the eyes of a homeless youth to get a snapshot of American homelessness. You will notice that every character that this main character meets represents a certain demographic of individual that happens to struggle with homelessness. Hunger of the Pine is really a compelling story about one woman, young woman's, struggle with homelessness. And homelessness as seen through the eyes of somebody who is living on the street. Our main character, Aria Abbott, never had a home. She's been struggling within the foster care system and in group homes for most of her life. Now she finds herself in one such foster situation that becomes so unbearable that she, like many other homeless youth, decides to run away. So this chronicles first her experience living on the street in the East Coast in Chicago. But it is at this point in the story that we meet Taylor, who is a charismatic LGBTQ youth who has this dream for fame and fortune. And most people don't know, but perhaps the demographic of youth that is the most predisposed to homelessness, or the most at risk, is LGBTQ. So Taylor convinces Aria to follow his dream, which should be her dream, for fame and fortune by going to Hollywood. And so the two board a bus to Hollywood, to Los Angeles, California, expecting, of course, this overlay experience or this fantasy reality to be awaiting them there. Instead, what awaits them is the reality of homelessness in Los Angeles. It is in this world of life on the streets in Los Angeles, that Aria begins to meet all these characters that represent a demographic of homelessness in the United States of America. And she meets them in an abandoned car lot, which becomes really the center of this novel. All these people are homeless for different reasons, and here they are living out their lives in the forgotten margins of society. Spoiler alert. On top of figuring out the harsh reality of American homelessness firsthand and taking you along for the ride, our main character, Aria, also finds herself in an incredibly steamy love story, in an interracial relationship. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to ruin the plot for you. I don't want to ruin you experiencing this book for yourself. Some of you who know me may know this already, and some of you may not. But what really began my journey as an author in general, this is book number 6, is actually a homeless man. I was stopped in a car at a stoplight, and I remember looking right, and there was a man who was digging around in a trash can. And I remember thinking, how can I get the information that I know as a spiritual teacher, as a new thought leader, into that man's hands? And I realized that one place that homeless people love to hang out is public libraries, because there they have access to many resources. So I remember thinking if I wrote a book, at least somebody could rent it or check out that book. So it's rather ironic that my first novel is pretty full circle as to how I became an author in the first place. I became really interested in all of these causes, or the why, behind homelessness. Why youth homelessness? Because it's an epidemic and most people don't realize that, and because most of us, because of our stigmatization and our marginalization of homelessness, don't realize that this archetypal picture we have of a homeless person does not represent the reality of homelessness. And in fact, homeless youth are often the hardest to recognize. Because of their youth, they are less disheveled. You may pass them on a street and just think it's somebody that is going from school to home, when that's not the reality. So it's a topic that I wanted to draw a lot of attention to. It's also this assumption that people in society make that stuff isn't happening. There's no possible way that there's a bunch of kids that are just wandering around on the streets with no home. Especially in an industrialized country. That seems like something that everybody thinks is somebody's responsibility. And yet there are these major fissures and cracks in the system itself within Western society, not to mention the other countries in the world, that make this kind of thing possible. And I really do want people to gain understanding and awareness around those cracks and fissures. A lot of people are going to ask me, why a novel? I've got two answers for this. The first is that, as a teacher in general, I am acutely aware of the fact that you can talk to a lot of people about situations, but that doesn't mean they're going to have a full understanding of what's going on. It is the first-person experience that helps people to relate and helps people to really grasp what is happening at a ground level. So I knew that I could accomplish a hell of a lot more understanding of this topic in general if I put people in first-person perspective as a homeless person than if I talk about homelessness. The second reason is, I'm a writer. Now here's the thing about writing. What I usually write is in the self-help genre. That's informational writing, which I love, don't get me wrong. But the skill of writing is really about descriptive writing. I consider myself, first and foremost, a descriptive writer. So this is my first way of really putting myself out there in the world as a writer with the skill of writing, not just using writing to convey information. So you can get a taste of this novel. I'm going to be reading you an excerpt from the book itself. The reason that I've selected this particular part of the book is that it explains the title. They were in the deserted doorways, their cardboard boxes erected like monuments to commemorate their anguish. The irony of their lives written in the sign on those boxes reading this side up. Their thirst could not be quenched by the water they didn't have. Their hunger could not be satiated by the food they could not afford to buy. No one thinks they will end up like this. No little 5-year-old boy or girl sits on the carpet of their kindergarten class during sharing time and says they want to be homeless when they grow up. Before Aria had become one of them, she had always looked at homeless people like they were those people. Now she understood that a life on the streets was just a hair's width away from almost anyone. Given the right cocktail of conditions, anyone could find themselves here. They were not a different species, even though it comforted people to think of them that way. To separate themselves from those people who were homeless made folks feel further away from being homeless themselves. But the truth is, those people were people just like you or me. They, the outcasts of mankind's ambition, the carriers of the shadows that no one truly wants to face. There was a pining in their movements, a boundless yearning for a kindness they had either tasted or never tasted, a deep hunger for love they might or might not ever find. Their lives were the hunger of the pine. The first step to ending homelessness is to demarginalize homeless people, to destigmatize it, and to bring this topic closer to home. Homelessness is going to continue to be an issue as long as we continue to make it an issue that those people face. If we don't identify with and really understand people who struggle with homelessness, we're going to always consider it not our problem. It is my sincerest wish that you enjoy the characters in the story, the storyline itself, the writing that conveys all of it, and the messages inherent in this book. and with it, that you come away with a true understanding of homelessness in America. It is my sincerest wish that you will participate in the pre-ordering of this book. If you do pre-order this book, it's going to ship out on the very first day that it's released. The day this gets shipped, the day this is released, is October 13th, which, by the way, is my own father's birthday. I didn't pick it. The universe did. This includes special offers for businesses who want to order a high volume of this book. Another reason for this is that I want to put this topic of homelessness and the various systemic failures that lead to homelessness in the public eye. The way to do that is with pre-sales. Pre-orders is what leads to bestseller lists. Bestseller lists is what leads to interviews. Interviews is how I can have a conversation with the general public about homelessness. The third reason that I want you to pre-order this book is because I am personally donating all of my personal profits from the pre-order directly to Youth Homelessness. So if, after all of this, you want to jump on board, I want you to head over to hungerofthepine.com. And I want to personally thank you for your interest in my first novel. It feels nice and juicy as an author. I also want to thank you for caring. I want to thank you for your courage to dive into the first-person perspective of American homelessness. Have a good day.